Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of The Best of Pedalshift. This is a quick interlude on the Route Scouting series, but that will return next week for the final two parts over the next couple of weeks. On this edition, we revisit Pedalshift number 128 and the must-have tools for your next bicycle tour. Consider this an evergreen episode of the pod. This was originally podcast July 19th, 2018. Enjoy. On this episode of the show, we're in Gear Talk. Haven't done a Gear Talk in a while. It's a section of the show where we talk about the types of things that you bring along on a bike tour. Your gear, right? Gear Talk's kind of self-explanatory. This episode is from an idea by Sax Manavan on Instagram. Go check out Sax Manavan. About tools that I carry on tour. And Sax Manavan asked, how many inner tubes or tires, or even a podcast on how you change a tube on a Brommy? Well, there's plenty of good ones on that, so you can go check those out. I'm sure many would be interested and even perhaps explain how many miles a tire gets in your travels. I know it varies by type and terrain. So I thought I would focus on the tool elements of all of this, and not just the Brompton, but also on others as well. So why don't I guess I can also answer those other questions really quickly. How many miles a tire gets? Boy, that really varies. I have tended to find that my tires have not really worn out. They've tended to get damaged. That ends their lifespan for me, on a couple of instances where that's happened. I tend to go with Schwalbe Marathons. They're largely indestructible, except when they're not. I've talked about when there have been issues before. I've gone back to the Schwalbe Marathon Plus. I think that for those, I've put thousands and thousands of miles on those, and there's barely a dent in them on the bikes that I've had them on. I'll be riding on those again for the Oregon tour, just because it's one less thing to think about. I just don't get flats on them, and that's really nice to have. Not saying that you can't get them. They're just much, much, much more sturdy than other types of tires that I've ever tried out. So, let's see. And what else, miles of tire? Yeah, I would say for, the tire change, on a Brompton, there are a lot better videos than what I can do. In fact, I've never had to change a Brompton tire in the wild, and I'm kind of grateful for that. One of the reasons I use Schwalbe Marathon tires on it. It's just one of those things. I would much prefer to have a little more weight in the tires than have the possibility of having to change a flat. So that's that. I do think that there are some great videos out there. I believe that the New York City shop that specializes in Bromptons has my personal favorite, so you can just Google that or search for that on YouTube. So as far as tools, I think that I've gotten to the point where the tools that I carry, I've refined over time. And I think that I have found a nice spot where I'm bringing certainly more than a minimalist toolkit. However, I don't think I'm carrying tools that I haven't ever used on a tour. So I feel pretty comfortable that I have the nice balance of ability to handle things on the road, balanced with weight, balanced with bulk, all of those different types of things. So why don't I talk about that for the rest of the show? So we'll start off with the Brompton, because the Brompton is easy. There is one toolkit that I carry, and I've got a link in the show notes. It is the official Brompton toolkit. It is really one of the most ingenious set of tools I've ever run into. Since it's made by Brompton, you know two things. Number one, it's exactly what you need for anything that's on the bike. And two, it's expensive AF. I mean, it is so pricey compared to other types of tools out there, but it is kind of perfect. It even has tube patches. I use it occasionally for non-Brompton types of fixes as well, because it's so compact and so nice. The best part of it is it fits inside the front frame tube, so you always have it. As people in the UK would say, brilliant. I think it is fantastic. Go check that out. I've got a link in the show notes for that. That's really it in terms of tools that I bring while I'm touring on a Brompton. Since it fits in the frame, in the tube, it doesn't take up any extra space. It's really, really great. Now, for those of you who don't ride on a Brompton, like me also, I have a list of tools that are really, as I mentioned, I think everything that I need for a short tour or even a longer tour. I think that if I was on a more expedition style tour that would be going on, I don't know, a month or longer, which, I've done before, maybe I would consider bringing some additional tools. But I have to be honest, as I look at this list here, I think this really handles most things that you could get. So first up is your multi-tool, your Allen wrenches, all of those different types of things. I've got a couple that I bring. I don't know why I bring multiple ones. Sometimes I think on the Green Goblin out in Oregon, I believe that in order for me to adjust the saddle, I need 2 hex wrenches, if I'm not mistaken. I think that there was a reason why I've brought 2 before. I don't always do that. I only bring 2 when I need it, but it is sort of helpful to have a multi-tool. It's kind of critical to be able to do little adjustments, especially saddle adjustments. That tends to be the thing that, of all things that I do, I am fiddling with the saddle on a tour. Not substantially. It's just making those micro adjustments as necessary. I find that at times my saddle will sink over, a few hundred miles of riding. Maybe I'm not putting it in tight enough. I don't know, but I do notice that I am finding that I fiddle with the saddle height a little bit. Often that's also because I'm traveling with my bike and I have to take the saddle out. So it's always just kind of finding that real perfect thing. I do recommend that you mark where your saddle height is with a Sharpie or something along those lines. Just makes it a little bit easier. Despite that, I still find that I use that multi-tool most often for saddle adjustment. Next up, 1 or 2 spare tubes. And that sort of just depends on the length of my ride and how I'm feeling and how much stuff. If I'm riding real heavy, I'm bringing all the panniers, all the bags, whatever, I'll often throw in 2 just because why not? I have found that when I do get flats, I get them more than once. It's a strange thing. And usually that means there's something wrong with my tire. I've mentioned on this show even that I don't tend not to get flats on Marathon Plus tires. That is true, but I've had other tires where it has been a problem, where I have gotten those punctures or other sidewall issues. Even when I am taunting the bicycle touring gods and saying I never get flats on Schwalbe Marathon Pluses, I'm still going to bring spare tubes. Why? Because it's so much easier when you get a flat to just pull out that bad tube, whatever has happened to it, it's not relevant. You sweep through the tire to make sure that there's nothing in there that's going to hack up your new tube. You pump it up and you get going and you deal with that old tube later. I know that there are a lot of people who don't even consider patching up old tubes. I'm not one of those folks. I will patch them just because when I'm on tour, if I use my spare tube, I want to make sure I have another good tube that's ready to go if I do need it. So I'll often in the next camp patch that up, which leads to the next thing that I bring along, a patch kit. Spoiler alert, I bring patch kits. Again, I tend not to use the patch kit while I'm sitting there on the side of the road or the trail. I'll give you a good example. I had problems with the sidewall of my, this was the Marathon Supreme tire that I really like, but it's given me a few problems here and there. And I'm sure I talked about this on the podcast. I was sitting there getting attacked and eaten alive by mosquitoes on the C&O while I was trying to use a patch kit on this tire that kept going, that kept puncturing. And of course, I had DEET on my hands and it was just dissolving all rubber I touched. So it's just no good. I don't like it when I'm under pressure to be patching a tube on the side of the road. Just because I've had such miserable experiences when I've been doing it, I tend to like to have that extra spare tube. However, let's say I've gone through all my spare tubes. Let's say that for some reason my tires are not being the armor that I need on the ground. Let's say there's tons of those radial tire wires. I know I run into them all the time on the West Coast. Why wouldn't I on this next trip? I at least have the ability to patch a tube if I need to, even when I'm on the road, on the side of the road. Other things that you need, of course, these are all of these things kind of go together, really. If you're going to carry spare tubes and patch kit, you're going to want to bring tire levers. Schwalbe Marathons are, regardless of type, are tough to get on and off. They are very, very firmly on that wheel. So you're going to need a good set of tire levers. I've got them. I bring them. They're great. They're cheap. They work well. Tire boots, only because I've had issues with the sidewalls before and with other tires before. My Continentals, I had problems with them. The dollar bill trick also works if you get a gash on the side, but a tire boot's nice to have. I bought them ages ago and it stays in my toolkit. It just stays right in there. I haven't had to use one since. Tool that I like, well, that kind of handles between the spare tubes, the patch kit, the boot, and the tire levers. That handles all of your wheel and tire issues. And those are the things that I would say are the most likely thing to be an issue from a maintenance perspective. Those are all musts. I think that everything that I've listed here so far is in the must category. And I think that the next 4 are also ones that I would say are musts, but in terms of their likely needs, I would say they could be left at home if you're just going out for a day ride or if you're going for an ultralight kit. You could conceivably leave all of these other things at home in this next category, but these are ones that I always like to bring as well. They're in my always kit. The knockoff Leatherman. Leatherman's a multi-tool. For those of you who aren't in the States, I don't know if this is an international tool or not. It is a folding set of pliers. It's got a knife in it. It's got can opener. It's just a handy type of tool to have, especially for camping. Maybe not so much for when I am using it on a bike, although I have used it for a variety of different things on the bike. Screwdriver, things like that, for things like, putting on or taking off fenders. I think that the Leatherman is a great tool. I have a knockoff one that works just as fine as anything else. I think I use it most. It's got a can opener on it, and that's probably what I use it most for when I've got cans to open on tour, which is not atypical when I'm cooking. Next up, these I just think you should have a whole handful of them on you at all times. That's zip ties. Zip ties are really great for getting pieces of your bike that are flopping around to stay unflopped. I've used them and sometimes I'll double them up to make them larger. But sometimes I've used them when my fenders have gotten in the way or start rubbing. I can kind of pull them up and around. They're good for fastening all sorts of different things. I've had it where you can use zip ties where you've got something that breaks on you that needs fastening. You can use a piece of metal or even a piece of wood plus zip ties to basically think of it this way, like as a cast, if something breaks. So I've seen people who have had issues with their racks where the rack shears off. If you can use a very firm piece of wood, or better yet, a piece of metal and some zip ties, you can get your rack to work again, at least to get you into the next town. Zip ties are magic. You must have them. Also magic, duct tape. I don't leave home without duct tape. It is the type of thing that you can use to seal up punctures in your wet gear or your dry bags to make them at least be able to handle keeping your gear dry down the road. Duct tape is magical. It is also a quick fix for a lot of things. It can be used in first aid. Duct tape just is really, really helpful. It can fix tents. It can fix everything. I've used it in so many different practical ways I've forgotten. I could do an entire episode on the magic of duct tape. I will spare you from that. We'll just say bring duct tape. Pro tip, and this is not new. This is a stolen idea from 100,000 other people. When you get your duct tape, it's going to be in that big fat roll, right? Well, it turns out the duct tape, of course, sticks to itself. That's the whole idea with a roll. You don't need that big cardboard thing in the middle. So what I'll often do is I'll take the duct tape roll, and I will kind of do a much skinnier roll around either maybe a piece of pencil or really to itself, and just roll it that way. Then it is much less bulky, yet you could have a lot of length. I tend to use pieces of it, not real long strips, but you can do the long strips if you store it that way. So duct tape, that is your magical thing. Last thing on the I bring it every time list, chain lube. But Tim, you say, you're terrible at lubing your chain on tour. And to that I say, you pay attention to the Pedalshift project. I am terrible about proper chain maintenance when on tour. If I'm going for a couple of days, I very rarely lube the chain. On this next Oregon trip, I am intending to bring my chain lube, because I always do, and I'm intending to be good about chain maintenance on this entire trip because I am just terrible at it, and it's one of those things that I need to get better at, and I encourage you to do the same. You don't need to do it every night, although frankly, it would probably be a good idea. I know people who are really, really meticulous about their chain maintenance, and they end up having much better rides. It's better for your drivetrain. It's not going to wear out as fast. There's all sorts of good reasons to lube your chain. I should do it more often. Thank you for chastising me from afar. Okay, so that is the list of all musts that I bring. These are every single tour, regardless of length. Now there are a list of a few things that I don't always bring, but I should, especially for longer rides or when I'm riding a little bit heavy. Again, when I say I ride heavy, that's when I'm sort of like, I'm just bringing everything, screw it. Doesn't matter. I don't care how much weight I've got for whatever reason it is. I will often bring a mini Crescent wrench. These are like the dollar store variety. These are not fancy. They're the adjustable Crescent wrenches. I bring those along for removing and tightening pedals when I travel, because you do have to remove your pedals when you fly, for instance. I am going to be doing that, of course, for the Oregon trip because I am going to fly the bike out. I'm going to be bringing along a mini Crescent wrench for that. It works just fine. I mean, I could conceivably bring my large actual pedal wrench and just leave that at my brother's. In fact, I may do that just because then it'll be a lot easier to get it on and off. But when I'm traveling, I never bring that. When I don't have the opportunity, when I'm not doing a loop like I am, I'm going to be starting and ending in the same spot. I'm going to be at my brother's place. When I'm not, I bring that mini Crescent wrench. So I'm talking myself out of the mini Crescent wrench, perhaps. It is handy for putting on and taking off fenders as well. There's a few things where the mini Crescent wrench can be helpful. So maybe I'm talking myself back into it. See, live podcasting. Chain link and chain link tool remover. I don't always bring these things with me. I should for longer tours, and I frequently do. I'm trying to think here. I think I've had 2 issues in all of the time I've ever been touring with a chain. And so I don't fear chain issues all that much. That being said, a chain breaker should be a must in all of your kits in case you ever do have a problem with your chain, because we've talked about this on past pods. You can knock out the broken links, reform it together, and go as a single speed as necessary. For me, I run on those chains with the easy chain link remover. That's that thing where you squeeze the chain together closer and it pops out easier. It's for easier chain removal so you can clean it and whatnot. I bring it on longer tours. I bring the chain link tool remover. You don't need to. I just find that because I'm terrible at chain maintenance, that it doesn't kind of release itself very easily. So the chain link tool remover comes along with me. It's about the size of a small set of pliers. It's a useless amount of weight for the vast majority of the times I've ever brought it along, but every once in a while it's useful when I've needed to remove the chain. So I'll probably bring it on this tour, even though I'm trying to ride a little bit lighter. I just want to have that peace of mind when I've got it. So those are all of the tools that I bring. Those are all sort of in the musts, or I like to bring them kind of list. Now, I want to give you a couple of things that I should bring every time, but often don't. Number 1 should be zero surprise, and that is a dedicated rag to wipe my chain down. Why? Because I'm terrible at chain maintenance, and I should bring that. And if I have it, especially if I put it in a little Ziploc bag for afterwards, so that it doesn't get everything else oily and messy, I would probably be better about handling my chain lubing every night. So that's something that I'm going to bring along. In fact, I'm going to grab my lousiest, worst bandana, and I'm going to get a Ziploc bag, and I'm going to put that lousy bandana inside the Ziploc bag and throw it in with the rest of my gear before I leave for Oregon, because that's going to come with me. I don't bring it along every time, and I probably should. Second thing on my list, a spare spoke or a spoke replacement kit. I have to give a shout out to REI. And, well, I guess also to Brompton as well, but I haven't put nearly the miles on the Brompton. But as many of you know, I ride the now discontinued Novara Safari. I believe it is now the ADV 2.3 or some other terrible name to it. But the stock wheels that I have on this bike have been fan-freaking-tastic. I have never, knock on wood, blown a spoke on it. And that is kind of remarkable considering the amount of weight that I have put on that bike over the years and the amount of stress that has gone on that bike over the years. Have not had a broken spoke once. On my older Safari, I have had issues with that bike and that wheel. And I think part of it is that the replacement wheels that I've been getting, I don't think that I've been good enough about procuring a proper touring wheel for that bike. The stock tire on my newer Safari, though, has been remarkable. And as a result, I have never thought about bringing extra spokes with me, except when I'm on other bikes. I do have one of those nylon sort of replacement spoke kits, but I've never even purchased actual spokes to replace in any tire that ever goes because I've never had an issue with it. I think on this trip, I'm going to bring along the thready kind of style one. It's cool because it's got the instructions in it because frankly, I keep looking at it and I'm like, how the hell does this thing work? I have no idea, but I'll figure it out in a pinch if need be. Nice thing about Oregon is while there are stretches of no bike shops for good chunks of it, there are bike shops. So, frankly, worst case scenario, if I lose a spoke or two and the tire gets out of true, I can just undo the brakes as necessary. But I would like to keep my wheels in true, and having spokes or a spoke replacement kit, it's a good idea to bring. So resolved, I'm going to bring the spoke replacement kit with me. Now, that is sort of my list. You'll notice that it doesn't include a lot of bigger tools. I know that many people bring way more, and there are many people that bring way, way less. I know there are a lot of people that only bring a multi-tool, and that is it. A multi-tool, and maybe a spare tube or a patch kit. I think if you wanted to go most minimal, a multi-tool plus a patch kit, frankly, you would probably be just fine depending on where you're going, and especially if it's for a shorter tour and you are riding on tires that have been pretty favorable to you. I think you could get away with that. Don't forget a pump. I didn't include a pump in this, I just realized, and I don't know why I don't consider that a tool. That's just something you should be bringing. I mean, I don't, unless you're traveling with a group of people, I think everybody should have a pump on them. I mean, you could be the last person in your group and maybe you drop back a bit and you get a flat and then they're all riding ahead and they don't even know you're not there. So I think everybody should have a pump in there. So add that to the list. That's a must. If you are going to be going super minimalist, I think you got to go multi-tool pump, patch kit. That would be what I would say would be the absolute bare minimum. I think that if you're going to go heavy, you could, and you run into issues where you think you need to take off your cassette or something like that. I guess it just depends on how handy you are with your bike. For a lot of that kind of stuff, frankly, I'm going to the bike shop anyways, whether I'm on tour or not. There are just some things where having specialty tools has just never been worth it to me. I'd rather have a pro do it, rather bring it into a shop, whether I'm on the road or whether I'm at home. So I don't bring chain whips or anything like that. Frankly, I don't even own one. So there's that. I find that the list that I've gone through is really all I need. I think that you can do an enormous amount of things with zip ties and duct tape if you run into situations where stuff breaks. When I've had situations where my fenders have busted, and between zip ties and duct tape, I've been able to be just fine, not just for the rest of the day, but for the rest of the tour. So, use your ingenuity, use your fix-it kind of brain, that little corner of your brain that can fix things, and get yourself rolling as fast as you can, however you can. Most of the places where you're going to be touring, you're never going to be terribly far away from a bike shop. It may be a few days, but bring the stuff that can get you rolling in any given circumstance. Most of the stuff that you deal with are going to be things where you need to adjust the bike. So there's your multi-tool. You get a flat. So there's your patch kits or your tubes. Anything that's bigger than that is often things that are either so catastrophic, like, your derailleur falling off or something along those lines. You're not going to probably be bringing a spare derailleur. I know people that bring spare derailleur hangers, which I don't think is a terrible idea, but to be honest, it's just such a rare thing that I've ever seen that I've never really thought about bringing a derailleur hanger. To be honest, if my derailleur hanger breaks, I'm not sure if I could get the derailleur hanger put back on and have the bike work properly or shift properly. I could try. I probably would wing it, but I have a funny feeling that my bike would be kind of chattering. The chain would be chattering all over the place. Why? Because in addition to me not knowing how to put on a derailleur hanger or adjust it properly, I'm terrible at chain maintenance, as you all know. So, think about what's in your realm of fix-itness as well. If you don't know how to do anything with a particular tool, does it make sense to bring it with you? Probably not. That's another reason why I don't bring a chain whip ever, because frankly, I don't know. I mean, I know how to take off the cassette, but would I do it on the road? No, I would go to a bike shop. So I know for a fact, I'll use the derailleur hanger as an example, that I don't have the tools that can handle absolutely anything that could happen to me on the road, but I've narrowed it down so it's in the right realm of what is likely to happen, the 95 to 99% likely to happen kind of a thing. Everything else, that's kind of like getting struck by lightning in a way. And there are just a host of additional tools that I would have to bring to handle that 1%. And it's just not worth it to me. Worst case scenario, if let's say my derailleur hanger did break and I don't have one. Well, first of all, I would think back to this episode and mock myself incessantly. And then I would think, okay, where am I? How do I get myself to a bike shop? Do I have to hitch a ride? Can I call? Am I close enough to a town that has Uber or Lyft? Any of a variety of different types of things can kind of cross my mind to handle that kind of situation. If I'm in the middle of nowhere, there's always pushing. That's the other thing as well. I mean, it's happened to me before where I've had a tire that was so damaged that I couldn't even go any further until I realized that I could zip tie the tire to the frame and then roll downhill to the next town. That ended up working. Sometimes you just end up getting to a point where your frustration comes up with the answer. And that's what happened there. So overall, I want to thank also Mr. Sax Manavan. I'd like to thank Sax Manavan for coming up with the idea for the show, because I think this is important stuff. What types of tools to bring along. I hope that this was helpful for you as a way of comparing what you've got in your toolkit with what I've done over time. I don't have all the answers. Some folks who listen to this may say, you need to bring X, Y, and Z more because these things always happen. I don't begrudge anybody for bringing more or less. I think that it's just helpful knowing what maybe I bring to kind of compare to what you've got, and hopefully that can be helpful for your next tour. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.